Lawrence.
It's good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. Yeah. How are you, my friend?
I have been better, but thank you for asking. It's a difficult question to answer at the moment. I have not gotten any good at answering it recently. Just after that, we don't need to.
Yeah,
get into it.
I mean,
no,
shit,
I saw on social media, their words are inadequate.
Most people just lie.
Yeah, you just say I'm good. How
just
are you?
lie.
Yeah.
I'm good. Keep it moving.
Yeah, most people do just lie. That is correct. 5, but when someone asks me how I'm doing, I like to tell them how I'm doing.
Well, especially when they add with comma, my friend. Well, then I feel the need to be honest with you, and then it just complicates everything.
Yeah, that's where we are with the awkwardness of this.
We're wasting his time.
You promised.
It's all good.
Well, we started already.
We started already. It was a great awkward start for us.
A person on X writes in, Stugatz saying that he expected the worst from the Jets and wasn't surprised at all by the Aaron Rodgers injury after predicting they would go 15-2 is why he's the best.
Gotcha!
Matthew Berry, I think, is viewed as the best when it comes to the brand of fantasy football. In fact, I don't know, Matthew, and thank you for joining us. I don't know who you view as a competitor in the business of this. If Shams and Woj are competing, who's the person out there that you look at and say, this person is trying to come and take my corner?
You know what? No one's ever asked me that question. And there's no easy way to answer that without sounding really egotistical, right? Because I either say, oh, well, this person is somebody that, I either say I don't have any competition, which sounds super egotistical, or I say this person is, and I don't know. Here's what I will tell you is that the people I respect, I'm in business with some way, somehow. And the fantasy industry is filled with it, and sports betting industry is filled with a ton of people that I think are really, really good at their jobs. But, I have this startup Fantasy Life, and a lot of the people that I have hired for Fantasy Life are the people that I respect most in the industry. And so I'm lucky in that, guys like Dwayne McFarlane and Ian Hartitz and Matthew Friedman and Pete Overzet and Kendall Valenzuela have come and worked on Fantasy Life for me. And then, there's a lot of people great at NBC. I have tremendous respect for my former colleagues at ESPN. So, but I do not think that there is someone in the industry that is, to your point, a Shams to my Woj, or my Shams to somebody else's Woj, depending on how you want to say it. I don't think there is that person.
Well, I want to talk to you, though, about the business of Fantasy Life that you mentioned, because you had athlete investors on this. The newsletter is a growing thing. And I want to ask you, because you told us last time you were on with us, very complimentary things about ESPN, but they wouldn't let you do some of the side projects that you wanted to do. They wanted to inhibit your freedom. So take me through what had to happen for you to get to LeBron James and others to invest in what it is that you were doing with fantasy.
You want me to talk to you about just sort of building that business once I left ESPN?
Yes, building it, and also the recruitment of money, because athletes are seeing value in this because you're a industry leader.
Yeah, it was honestly, it wasn't. I know that, look, I'm very blessed, and I'm, knock on wood, but candidly, it wasn't that tough to raise money for it. We actually had to turn people down that wanted to invest. I mean, because it's a pretty good story, right? I mean, very simply, I bootstrapped the whole thing, right? So it's one of the reasons why I left last year was that I felt there's some momentum. So ESPN were like, you got to get rid of it. And I'm like, I don't want to get rid of it. So I had this merch store, this fantasylife.com merch store, and was doing pretty well. And we had some, email addresses, and we were sending out emails to everyone that signed up for the merch store that had fantasy news and analysis and advice in it, just in a free email. And I'm friends with a guy named Austin Reef, who is the CEO and co-founder of Morning Brew. Are you familiar with Morning Brew?
No.
And I know the name of it, but I don't know what it is.
I'm
I've
sorry.
heard more.
There was an awkward pause there, and I felt the need to be honest.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It is a newsletter for they consider themselves the Wall Street Journal for millennials. Anyway, but it's a newsletter business that was founded by Austin and his partner and did very, very well, and then ultimately sold for a ton of money to Business Insider. Okay, so anyway, Austin's a friend, and we're having lunch, and I'm like, listen, I don't know anything about emails. Like, look at this, and can you give me some advice? Am I doing anything right here? And he goes, yeah, here's my advice. Screw your merch store. Focus on this. This is your business. And he's like, you're doing about 8 billion things wrong, but even with one hand tied behind your back, you're doing better numbers than we did in year 3 of Morning Brew. He says, this is a real business. You need to focus on this and run it like a real business. And I'll give you some advice. And he is on our advisory board. And so he's been a great friend of the company.
On that Morning Brew.
And so
I knew what you were talking about.
Definitely.
I read it this morning. What just happened that Jessica and Tony fell out laughing there in the middle of my conversation with Matthew Berry because neither of them could be bothered to be helpful when he asked them the question, have you heard of Morning Brew?
That's not what happened. You were talking to us in our headset, and I do know what the Morning Brew is. It's a very popular. Yeah. I'm shocked that Mike didn't know what it was.
I had to fill the silence like a idiot.
He awkwardly said no, and then I heard it like 5 seconds later, and I was like, oh, I know what it is. And then Tony was like, I know what it is too. And then we were both laughing at Mike.
Such a fool.
Do you guys want to offer anything on the microphone?
I want to ask him about Guillotine Fantasy Leagues because I saw this clip on my IG Reels algorithm because it's fantasy football time, and that's what I'm searching mostly. And I want you to tell Dan and the audience about this new fantasy format that I think might actually make the whole concept exciting for Dan because we've lost him a long time ago with fantasy talk. But It's a brand new – people have been playing fantasy sports for decades now, and for something new to come on the scene that's unexpected is exciting. Tell the people about it.
So, Dan, let me ask you this. I'm happy to explain Guillotine League because it's awesome and I play it and it's a lot of fun. But we're halfway through me answering the first question about how did I get LeBron to invest in this thing. So you tell me. Like I think all I've done at the moment so far.
I want to talk. I want to talk. This is the thing about fantasy. Okay, I don't actually hate fantasy. What I hate is that everyone who has a fantasy team thinks that I'm interested in what happened with their fantasy team, and I have no interest whatsoever in anybody else's fantasy team. This has been a bit of a profitable plague that has come throughout sports where everyone thinks they're a general manager. But the business of what you're doing is actually interesting to me because you've cornered a difficult market. And anybody who thinks that this is guessing or that you're not playing a very sophisticated brand of poker with how valuable your information is, they don't understand what an assassin you are as a businessman to break free from ESPN because you saw that they were limiting you in a place where they shouldn't have proprietary rights over you if they want you to succeed as a businessman.
That is correct. And so fast forward just real quickly. In essence, basically, I bootstrapped the business for a year. We did 7 figures in revenue. We were profitable. I took the money from the merch store and I hired one employee. I hired a CEO, a guy named Elliot Chris, who's done a great job. And so over the course of the year, that was March 1st, 2022 that I hired Elliot. April 1st, 2023, 13 months later, we hired employee number 12. We're now up to 15 full-time employees on the company. And so in essence, basically, to answer your question, how did I get to some of these athletes and some of these big businessmen that invested as well? Casey Wasserman, Maverick Carter, Tony Khan, owner of the Jaguars, Roger Ehrenberg, co-owner of the Miami Marlins, Chad Hurley, the co-founder of YouTube, George Pine, the CEO of Bruin Capital, some of those guys, along with the Joe Burrows, the Josh Allens, the John Legends, the Austin Ecklers, the Jamar Chases of the world. And LeBron as well through his family office. The way we were able to get to them is it's a very simple story. The newsletter business is hot. It's fantasy and sports betting, which is hot. We are a profitable business, and it's me at the center of it. And oh, by the way, I'm working now. I'm no longer working at ESPN. I work at NBC Sports. And when I went to NBC Sports, I was very clear, like, I'm not coming to NBC Sports unless I can do whatever I want with Fantasy Life. And NBC Sports was awesome. And they said to me, look, Chris Collinsworth owns Pro Football Focus. Mike Florio owns his own investment club. We are comfortable with our talent having an entrepreneurial side as long as you accomplish what we need you to do for us on NBC side. And so they've been very happy with me. It's been a great first year at NBC. And so it was actually a fairly easy pitch to a lot of these investors, basically saying like, hey, here's the business. We're already profitable. Here's where we're going. I've got a good team behind me. I've got my social platforms as well. And so it wasn't that tough. And in the case of a lot of these people, and I'm happy to talk about any individual investor if you want, but I know all of them through fantasy football. All of them play fantasy football in some way, shape, or form. And so I have a I'm closer with some of them than others, but the athletes don't necessarily play, but they understand the business of it. Austin Eckler does play, but Josh Allen played when he was in college. And so the people that manage their investments understand what a great opportunity it was as well. So happy to talk through any of that, but that's how that happened, Dan. And I do want to give one shout out here specifically. We talked a little bit last time, and I actually don't remember if this was on air or off air because you and I had a nice conversation after the show. But your COO, Bill Capadia, is a dear friend of mine, has been for a long time. Him and I started at ESPN around the same time. And when I was thinking about all this, Bill and I had probably like a 4-hour dinner in New York where I asked him, I said, I'm really inspired by Dan and what he did, leaving ESPN and forming Meadowlark Media. Can you take me through sort of that process? And, don't tell me any secrets, but just can you tell me how you sort of helped build that? And he took me through that and gave me a bunch of invaluable advice. And so, again, I said this to you privately. I'll say it publicly. Thank you for loaning Bimmel to me for, some time. You've got a really good employee there.
Matthew, in 11 minutes or less, can you describe what a guillotine league is?
I can do it in less than 1 minute, right? A guillotine league is very simple. You draft a fantasy team just like you normally would. It's a normal draft, right? And you start a normal lineup. What happens is you don't play head to head. You just start your lineup. And on Tuesday morning, after all the games have been played, the team that has the lowest score in the league is eliminated from the league forever, is just cut. And all of the players on that person's team go back into the free agent pool for other teams to claim. And you keep doing this until there are no teams remaining, until there's only one team remaining. That is a guillotine league. And it is incredibly fun. It's a sweat like no other as you're going into Monday Football, and all of a sudden your quarterback has gone down with an Achilles injury. And, you also had Garrett Wilson, and is he going to get any passes? And so it's just, it's sort of a really intense game because once you're done, you are done. And because it keeps getting smaller and smaller, it's the 8th week of the season, and all of a sudden, like Patrick Mahomes is on your waiver wire, and you're trying to decide, do I want to bid on Patrick Mahomes or Jalen Hurts? It's kind of crazy. And as the leagues get smaller, like the teams get better. And anyway, it's incredibly fun.
It seems like Dan wasn't really into the guillotine league. So Matthew, can you describe to him the vampire league? Maybe that will get him interested.
Yeah, 10 minutes or less.
By the way, I understand. I will just say this. I'll answer your vampire question in a second, but I'll say this. I understand Dan's plight because, that's literally my job. My life, my career is listening to other people talk about their fantasy teams. And even I'm like, yeah, I get it. You know what I mean? Like, so, right. It's a, it's a long running part of my take joke, right? No one cares about your fantasy team. So I totally understand. If I'm Dan Le Batard, the last thing I want to do is hear about your fantasy team. So I appreciate Dan's point of view on that topic there.
So
vampire league, Zoe?
Yeah, a vampire league very quickly is, in essence, say you pick your size league, say it's a 10-team league, and 9 of the people in the league draft like normally. One person is the vampire. That person does not draft. Okay. So then you go through the draft, and the rosters are expanded so that 9 teams have kind of a little bit of an expanded roster. They draft. Once the draft is done, they can make no moves. They can't pick up any players. They can obviously change their starting lineup, but they can't pick up any players. They can't make any trades. They're stuck with that team. The vampire now has to create a team of all the free agents, all the people that weren't drafted. And each week they will play another team. And if they beat a team that was able to draft, they're able to steal a player from the other team. They basically trade. They vampire, if you will, a player from the other team that they beat. And so as the season goes on, the vampire gets stronger, like in essence, sucks fantasy blood, if you will, out of the opposing teams. And so that's the idea is, can you, in essence, build a team from scratch? And think about it. Like this week, like no one drafted Puka Nacua. Like that would be somebody that you'd pick up, right? There are quarterbacks that emerged that probably didn't get drafted in those kinds of leagues. Jordan Love, Sam Howell had nice games, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a really fun format. I think, especially if you're the vampire. I've been the vampire before. It's a fun format. It's not as fun as guillotine, but it's fun.
Check out the Vampires Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, as well as his weekly articles and video content across Roto World on NBCSportsEdge.com. Before you get out of here, give everybody a valuable nugget of fantasy information that will carry them through the beyond, because they need Matthew Berry's inside information, secret sleepers, secret value, 8 minutes or less. Give everyone all of your maximum sleeper, most valuable information for free, that they don't have to go to a newsletter. They don't have to go find you. You're giving it to them because they found Matthew Berry right here. And as he just told you before, no arrogance. He's got no competitors. He's the best there's ever been.
Thank you. I will say that a lot of people questioning was Puka Nacua, the Rams rookie wide receiver, was he a fluke with his 15 targets? He tied with Tyreek Hill for the most targets in week 1. I don't think he was. He had a very strong camp. They like him a lot in LA. Even if Cooper Kupp, if and when Cooper Kupp comes back, my expectation is that Puka Nacua will continue to be a thing. I thought, there's a bunch of different usage things that were really interesting, I think, from week number 1. I'll just give you a random one. Nick Chubb caught 4 passes. They're sort of like, whatever, Nick Chubb, 4 passes. I'm like, well, but Nick Chubb, I'm not saying he's going to be Chris McCaffrey or Austin Eckler, but the fact of the matter is Nick Chubb, that's a north of 60 reception pace. And if that's going to be a thing, he got 4 targets. He was 3rd on the team in targets. If that's going to be a thing under this new offense, it's going to be more pass happy under Deshaun Watson. And Nick Chubb's going to catch 3 to 4 or 5 balls a game. Number 1 running back in fantasies within the range of outcomes for Nick Chubb, because he's, I think, the best pure runner in the game. And it's a team that should be in scoring position early and often, given their defense and an improved offense. So that was just sort of like a little thing that's like, oh, that's interesting. Zay Flowers got 50% of the target share for the Ravens. I mean, and looked electric. And with the injury to J.K. Dobbins, my expectation is that Zay Flowers, who got 2 carries in that game, I think he'll get more opportunities in the backfield as well. That's an offense that's going to be really interesting as well. So there's a couple of ask me any question about any player, and I'm happy to give you some stuff. But those were the first 3 things that popped in my mind.
6 more minutes.
You have 6 more minutes on the clock. If it's
I got to do it for 8
you don't have
minutes?
to use them, but
you don't have to use them. I'm just saying that everyone. I don't know how you feel walking through life, but I assume that you are surrounded by piranha. And that people want at every turn you to give them secrets because of how crazy they are about this thing, and they want to beat their friends, and they want to have more information that the other person doesn't have. And so I would assume your entire life is spent with people hassling you for secret information.
It is definitely a constant. I once had somebody who said, my dad once told me, never have a job where you could go to a party and somebody says, hey, let me ask you a question. Never be a doctor, or in my case, a fantasy analyst. I'm like, too late. It does happen. It definitely happens a lot. But on the other hand, Dan, the power of that, the fact that people want that information and that they're constantly asking, has led me to some amazing relationships and opportunities and things that I've gotten done, even just as we're talking about. Again, almost everyone that's on my investor list, and listen, it's not charity. Every one of them, they all have, very smart business analysts that look at the proposal and everything like that. But every one of those relationships started with, hey, let me ask you a question. Hey, I play fantasy and I'd like some advice. And so, it's led me to some amazing things, right? I mean, Avengers Endgame is because Joe Russo wanted some fantasy advice at one point, and I developed a friendship with Joe. So I'll give you some other ones just off the top of my head. I think that I'm nervous about Christian Kirk. I think his game will be better. But look, Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones on the outside, those are the 2 guys for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And so they played over 90% of the snaps. And Christian Kirk, who last year never had a snap rate below 75%, I think he was at 62% on Sunday against the Colts. Now, in fairness, the Colts have a great slot corner in Kenny Moore. So my expectation is that this week against the Chiefs, Christian Kirk will get more run. But make no mistake, that pecking order of the Jaguars offense, which I think is an emerging offense. I'm a Doug Peterson fan. I'm a Trevor Lawrence fan. It's Calvin Ridley. It's Zay Jones. And then it's Christian Kirk, who last year was a big, so I'd be nervous. I'm nervous about if I had Drake London, and I have 0 shares of Drake London. If I had Kyle Pitts, and I have 0 shares of Kyle Pitts this year, I would be super nervous Like that's a team that Arthur Smith is trying to hide his quarterback. And here's the thing. It works. They beat Carolina. They beat Carolina handily. Like, he's going to run like the Tyler Algier thing. I don't think he get a lot of his work came in the fourth quarter. It's still going to be Bijan. If you have Bijan Robinson, don't panic at all. But what I will say is that I don't know that offense, even in a negative game script, and they'll probably be in a negative game script against the Packers this weekend, but even in a negative game script, I don't know that offense can support 3 viable fantasy pass catchers. And I consider Bijan Robinson a viable pass catcher. He was involved in the passing game a lot. And then you've got Kyle Pitts and Drake London. So do I expect 0 and 1 targets for them like we saw on Sunday? No, but like in relative to where they were drafted, both guys, I think I would be very nervous if I had London or Kyle Pitts, because Arthur Smith wants to do nothing but run the ball and hide his quarterback. And as much as us in the world of fantasy football complain about it, it's working. They are competitive. Last year, they won their game against Carolina. It's a division that's winnable. I don't know why Arthur Smith would change. So
you're saying he wants to hide his quarterback, but when I saw him on the sidelines because he's put on a little weight and a mustache, I thought he himself was trying to hide. Because he looks like a different human being than he looked last year. Matthew, thank you for being on with us. Congratulations on your success. It's cool to watch.
Thank you, my friend. Anytime. Pleasure to be here.